Fantastic. I want to welcome everyone who is watching now, and I want to encourage you to quickly go and join us, share it with your friends, get someone on WhatsApp, tell them that I am going to be live now with someone who is a fantastic encouragement. She's an inspiration to not just women, to all people to keep on going forward, pushing towards the destiny that God has for you. So without further ado, I would like you, if you're on my page, Chantell Davis, then I want you to send us some comments. Tell us who's watching. I will bring your comments on so that we can share with you, participate. If you are on the rebroadcast or you're on the podcast, I want to welcome you and thank you for joining in these series of the series on becoming. It's the process of becoming a person of value. And I know that the people that I've interviewed in the past have really stirred your faith to go beyond what you thought is possible. So without any further ado, I want to bring on my guest for today, and she is none other than Shirvani Naran. She is one of our Mrs. Globe finalists. So welcome, Shirvani.
Hi, Chantell. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Perfect. It's great. I just see that there is a what do you call it? An echo. I wonder if just want to stop that. Let me just see. Wonder where this thing is picking up. Is there an echo on your side, Shirvani?
I can hear you fine. I don't know. Is it an echo when I speak?
No, it's an echo when I speak. So let's just see. Moira is here. Love to join. This is Moira. So excited to be here. I just want you to know from everyone watching now, because I can hear an echo in my ears of everything that I'm saying. So otherwise I'll just dig and try to overcome that. There is an echo. Okay.
Oh dear.
Okay. So I wonder how I fix that.
I just changed settings on my side as well. So tell me if it's any better.
Okay. Testing. Let me see. Just go on to this. Okay, so the mic. External microphone, testing everything. Echo cancellation is on. Okay, so this is live, and anything can and would probably happen. That was what we were taught in live television as well. But now the echo seems to be gone. Did you change anything?
I changed on my side as well. So let's see if it's any better.
Okay, cool. So your babies are taken care of in the background?
Yes, if you hear them, I do apologize. I've got the neighbors cutting trees next door, so there's going to be a bit of noise. These things happen at the best of times, but we'll work with it.
We'll work with it. Okay, fantastic. So we've got a few people on here who's really wanting to support. Annalene says, go Shirvani. And thank you so much. She said it's better now. The echo is gone. Moira said it's better now. So fantastic. I am so excited, Shirvani, to have you on here. Obviously, the previous ladies that I've had on was the CEOs and directors of Mrs. Globe and Mrs. Universe and so forth. And then some of the finalists of Mrs. South Africa. And you might be wondering, is this just pageant girl awareness? No, it's not. It's the overcoming stories. And when I saw your story and the tenacity, because you have to be tenacious and you have to fight for something when you really want it. And when I read what you said, Shirvani, and I saw your pictures and so forth, I thought, man, I take my hat off for you, because there are days where I just have a pimple and I don't want to go out in public and I just feel all of these emotions and things. But you have a life journey, and currently you're finding yourself as one of the finalists of Mrs. Globe in South Africa. So for that, we want to congratulate you, women of valor. But I want to go into your story a little bit and let people know who you are, why they can support you, that you're actually a face for overcoming. And you said your friends call you what is it that your friends name you?
They call me the confidence queen and the face of grace, because I think
face of grace and confidence queen. Fantastic. So there's so many people that's already jumping on, and this is going to be a fantastic. I believe that there must be some kind of a conflict when everything wants to go wrong beforehand. So this is going to be a powerful time of overcoming. The Lord says in Revelation 12:11 that you overcome by the blood of the Lamb and in the power of your testimony. And I believe that even today, as she is speaking, that there will be sickness and disease, wrong mentalities, fear, anything that has held you back to stop you from pursuing your purpose, that those things are going to fall off you. And how can we say that with such confidence? Because when the testimony is shared because of God's goodness, that same miracle working power is going forth. And we know that in the spirit, there's no distance. So I want you to receive even your miracle as we're listening to Shirvani speak today. So Shirvani, please first tell me, who is Shirvani Naran?
Sure. So I am 36 years old. I'm from Johannesburg. I'm a mommy of three beautiful kids. I've got an 11-year-old daughter, a 4-year-old son, and an 8-month-old little baba boy. So yes,
Wow.
it's been quite a journey. I was born with a very rare skin condition called epidermolysis bullosa, and we can get into that a little bit if you want quickly. So
Yes.
my mom, not completely normal pregnancy, went through all of the motions. I was the firstborn to my mom and dad. My dad's the youngest son. And so everyone was very excited, when mom was pregnant with me. And everything was fine right up until the day that I was born. And
Wow.
shortly after my birth, they placed the ID bands, on the baby's hands as soon as they are born and on the feet. And a couple of hours after I was born, my mom noticed a bit of redness around the ID bands on my hands, my wrists, and my ankles. And she did not know what was going on. She thought maybe it's a bit of an allergic reaction to the plastic, perhaps. And, didn't think too much of it. And, more hours had passed. And then she noticed the skin had started to blister. Like now, what looked like was fluid was underneath the skin. And the skin had actually come apart where the ID bands had been placed. So it looked like it was peeled off completely. And
Wow.
we didn't really know at that stage still what was going on. And then they took me off to give me a bath. The nurses had taken me off to give me a bath. And when I came back, kind of the room went quiet according to what my mom had said. And they placed me on the bed and she looked at me and she was furious. She thought they had burnt me because I was just covered in open wounds on my body. Skin had come off in places. I was missing skin, and she did not know what had went wrong in this time that I was taken away and brought back. And my dad
Wow.
came in and the doctors had come in and they looked at me and nobody could give any answers as to what was going on. And the more that the nurses had handled me and touched me, and the doctors obviously tried to see what's going on and investigate a little bit, and the more that they touched me, the skin just kept coming off. So it was almost like it was sticking to the gloves, the latex gloves of the doctors. It was coming off as they touched me, and everybody just went, hang on, let's not put any hands on this baby anymore. We have to figure out what was going on. And some specialists were brought in, and everybody basically went by textbook knowledge at that time. And they said it looks like epidermolysis bullosa. We can't confirm. They were too reluctant to do any sort of biopsy or skin testing or take any more skin off. And obviously, my parents didn't want to put me through any more of the trauma of having to go through that. But from the way I had presented from the day of birth into a few days after, they had concluded that it was epidermolysis bullosa, which quite simply explained is a blistering skin condition and a skin condition where the skin layers cannot stick together well enough. So the glue that holds the layers of skin together, the collagen in your body is lacking in my body, and it cannot hold the layers of skin together. So any sort of friction or trauma to the skin will just completely take the skin off.
Okay, so a question then. As this newborn little Baba that has this soft, beautiful pinkish skin, were you, obviously, this would be what your parents would have told you, but were you in a lot of pain? Were you a screaming, crying baby because of the pain of the skin just deteriorating?
Yes, mom said I cried. I screamed in pain. It obviously was very painful. I don't remember any of it,
Yes.
but she said I cried. I cried constantly. They, as a little baby, there's so little they can give to for pain control when you are that young. But
Yes.
I cried. She said I cried a lot, and it was obviously very heartbreaking for them, having to go through that. And I think even when mom talks about it now, she gets very emotional just having to relive those days. But
Wow.
even as a child, I think I remember just being in pain from a very young age, because there's things that I just knew that I couldn't do. I somehow knew that I couldn't fall on my hands or I'd be in pain. Like I was just somehow instinctively I knew that I wouldn't be able to crawl. I never crawled, for example. So that was one milestone I just completely skipped over, and I went straight to walking. But even with walking, they said I wouldn't be able to walk because my feet were so badly blistered. I mean, as you know, babies rub, they're always moving. Their hands and feet are always going like this. And every time my feet would do this, the skin would just come off. So mom had to wrap my feet in bandages all the time. I had socks placed on my feet, like right up until my knees, over my knees. She'd put tights on to line my legs, and my vest on the inside, we'd have to turn inside out because even the seams of the clothing were too rough for the skin. So I'd have to wear my clothes inside out. So it was everything that I wore had to be protective to the skin. She had to really think about everything and get creative about how to dress me. But yes, I think I remember being in pain and just knowing about pain and being aware of pain from such a young age that I just knew there were things that I couldn't do.
So, Shirvani, I mean, there's so many questions, and I really want to encourage everyone who's listening on the live right now that you are welcome to send in questions, because there might be things, and I believe, Shirvani, that it's all right with you for people to ask, because it's something that many don't know about, and to
Absolutely.
create awareness about this, and because this is your life that we're talking about. This has been your journey up to 36 years. And now we can get into what the doctor said, what your life expectation would be, and all of those things. So you have just trumped everything that people
Yeah.
said would not happen. But I want to ask you, obviously now you are wearing clothes and so forth. How are you dealing with it now? Was there medication or certain treatments that could help your skin, or for collagen to be better, or I don't know, anything like that? And then obviously your face looks beautiful. Are you allergic to any kind of skin products or makeup and things like that? Is your scalp affected? Just the daily, how do you go about?
Yes, so it affects absolutely everything. So even when I choose my clothing now, I have to be so careful about the kind of clothing that I choose. I'm always lined on the inside, so I'll usually have a vest underneath what I'm wearing just to add an extra layer of protection to the skin. Even with my undergarments, like wearing an underwire bra is impossible for me these days. I just go with normally like just a sports bra, something that's softer, that's more padded. Same with underwear and things like that. I've got to turn them inside out or just go. Now we have seamless options, which is great. So I go with the seamless options. But my feet are always wrapped in bandages, so that's for comfort and for protection 24/7. I'll go from bandages to bandages every time I have a bath. Basically, it's
Wow.
more comfortable for me. I found it's something that I'm so used to wearing, so it's not even something that's uncomfortable. Actually, being without the bandages on my feet is more uncomfortable because then the feet is completely exposed. And it's I blister so easy. The feet and the hands are by far the worst affected because you're walking, you're using your feet, you're using your hands all the time for things. So those two areas are the most prone to trauma. Same with like the knees, with the elbows, anywhere that there's a joint that needs, where there's a lot of movement, that's the areas that are quite badly affected. I know a lot of people say, but what about your face? My face is absolutely prone to blistering just as anywhere else on my body. It's just that if you think about it, you're not using your face as much as you'd use the hand. So it's not like your face isn't very actively involved in daily tasks. So I can be more careful when it comes to my face. I have to be careful, like especially around the kids. Now with my 8 month old that grabs and pinches and wants to touch mommy's face and that kind of thing. Like my neck is a complete mess because he grabs at every time I pick him up, he'll grab it like the collar of my dress or my top that I'm wearing just to for extra support. But when he does that, he scratches on my neck and takes the skin off. So it's things like that you can't prevent. But the face is a little bit easier to prevent wounds and that kind of thing happening with the face. And you asked about the scalp. The scalp is affected as well. So anywhere that there's collagen in the body, I mean, there's collagen in our bones, there's collagen in our hair, there's collagen in our skin, internal surfaces, external surfaces. So my hair is quite thin, the scalp is quite exposed, and that's we've tried over the years different kinds of treatment. Anything anybody ever said, take this or try that or try this miracle cream or this miracle drug, that's going to help to grow back your hair or strengthen your skin. I promise you, we've tried absolutely everything, but there is just no cure. It's a genetic condition. It's in the DNA. Basically, my body does not code for the production of collagen, if just to get into technical terms. So there's no way of ever being able to replicate the amount of collagen that I'll need, even with supplementary collagen products. Like now, you have ingestible collagens and things that you can take, which I do take, but it'll never be enough to replace or to replenish what the body is not making, if that makes
Mm,
any sense.
absolutely. But now I'm just thinking, so the inside of your mouth, is that not affected?
Yes, completely. So I can't open my mouth very wide. The cheeks on the inside have fused together to the gums itself. So my mouth is very tiny. My lips blister very easily. The inside of my tongue, the lining of my mouth, my palate. My tongue is actually, I'm tongue tied. So it's fused to the bottom of my mouth. So I can't stick out my tongue either. But all of it, the mouth into the throat, right down into my tummy, is all very affected. So swallowing is an issue for me. Chewing of food is an issue for me. I have to eat things that are very soft, take bites that are very, very small, like bite-sized amounts of food when I do chew. So I take, getting a meal down or even just a sandwich is like an hour-long process because it takes that long to chew and to swallow. I have to really chew it down to a complete pulp because the throat is extremely narrow from blistering on the inside. Just even a sip of water will sometimes, if there's an existing blister in the throat, will get into the skin and actually make the blister bigger, which just goes all the way down my throat. And then there's days where I just can't swallow at all. It closes up completely. So I get something called an esophageal dilation, which I get done every 6 months in hospital, in theater, where they go in, my surgeon goes in with a balloon dilator to actually widen up the throat to enable me to keep eating by mouth. A lot of people with the condition have feeding tubes, that the tube that goes directly into the tummy, which has been something we've looked at in the past, but my surgeon isn't keen to go that route just yet because just even managing the site of where they'd need to put the tube in would be quite difficult to manage. So, basically we've said for as long as they can keep me eating by mouth, we'll just continue doing esophageal dilations every 6 months. I'm lucky that, we're able to stretch it out to every 6 months and we just kind of go like that. Yeah.
You. I've got the greatest respect because I don't know that's the physical side of it, but the mental obstacles that you've had to overcome. Would you mind going with us through that journey? Were there ever times where you felt depressed or where you felt like, is this the way to live? Maybe when you were obviously going through puberty and developing and at a stage where everyone else is excited getting boyfriends, were you ever thinking, where do I find a husband that will live with all of those things?
I mean, of course, just like any other woman, from a little girl, I had those thoughts, where would I be one day? Would I even be able to grow up? We didn't know if I would menstruate normally. I was quite late with all of those things. And my mom, my sister had already started her periods and she's younger than me and I hadn't started yet. And all my friends had started periods and that kind of thing. And I didn't know, how was my body going to handle this? I remember my mom even saying she hoped it would never happen because she just couldn't figure out how I'd even be able to wear a pad. Because, as women, you have to put this thing on and then there's chafing and there's rubbing against the skin and there's all of that moisture that you've got to deal with. And she kept thinking, how is that area of my body even going to handle, going through all these things? And so these were concerns we had from the time I was very little. Childhood was when I was very much smaller. I'm talking, preschool, grade 1, grade 2. Those years were very lonely before I, could get into a routine of knowing who I was and getting bold enough to talk to other kids and, make friends and that kind of thing. And my mom would actually come and sit with me at school during lunch break. She'd bring a little
Wow.
pot of tea because I needed tea to help to eat my sandwiches, to soften them. So lunch break, she'd come and she'd sit with me during lunch breaks and she'd feed me on most days. She'd feed me my sandwiches with some tea. And she was my friend for very long. And then my sister, came into school. And I tell you, this is how God works because she's a year younger than me. And she was supposed to have gone to preschool the year that I went into grade 1. And somehow that year, the government decided that the age group for admittance to grade 1 was going to change. And so it changed from, I think it changed from 5 to 6 or 6 to 7. I can't remember exactly how it was. But anyway, she was younger and they pushed her into grade 1. So she skipped
Wow.
school altogether. So from grade one, she ended up being in the same class as me. And that was my friend. My sister was my friend from the day that she started grade one. And I think it helped just knowing that I had her. There was somebody now that was familiar. And mom didn't have to come to school now every day to sit and feed me my sandwiches, because now I had my sister that was with me. But also, I think it was a lot of responsibility for her, because she had this responsibility of now feeling like she needed to take care of me. So if I fell at school, or if I got hurt or was bumped by another kid, she'd have to say, "No, you have to be careful. You can't do that to my sister." Or she'd have to run to the teachers and say, "My sister got hurt," and then go to the office and phone my parents. So, there was a lot of responsibility placed on her, not just my parents, from the time I was a little girl, to take care of me. And then did start to make friends. And, I think I was very bold in my personality. Like from the time I was little, I just had a firecracker personality, if I can say that. And I was brave and I was bold, and I'd go up to other kids and I'd just start talking, and they'd start asking questions, and I'd assure them that it was okay to ask questions. And they'd say, "Okay, can we see the hand?" And I'd say, "Yes, you can see." And I'd show them. And that's how you kind of familiarize yourself with other people. And that's what I did. And I made friends. That I had a wonderful group of friends in primary school that really took care of me and went through all of the years with me and were very protective over me. But it was lonely. You have your little bubble that you live in, and you have your friends and you have your family. But then you go out in public, and the world is a big place. And like, for example, I hated going to the beach. That was just my absolute worst. And I couldn't explain to my parents, being little, why I hated going to the beach, because they loved putting me in salt water, which was good for the skin. And so they'd want to take me to the beach every chance that they got, to put me in the ocean and get me in the salt water, because it helped to heal the wounds over time. But I hated it, because I was so aware of the amount of eyes that were on me when I was at the beach. I mean, I couldn't wear a normal swimsuit, so I'd have to wear something that was more covered. I'd have to be, to go in with my socks and my bandages, and sometimes mom would sit and unwrap the bandages so she could get the feet into the water. But then people are staring. And it's so hard to not stare. You can't even blame people for doing that, because it's so visible. It's something that is so noticeable. And so when you see this child, and you wonder what happened to her, was she burnt, is she being abused at home, it would get things like that, because you just don't know what's going on, and people would come and ask questions. And just even growing up within the Indian community, there's this whole um thing about, if somebody is born with an illness or with a sickness, and I don't know if you've ever experienced this yourself, but there's this connotation, and they almost link it to, if there's sickness that's manifesting physically, there must be sin that's come from somewhere in the spiritual, somewhere in the ancestral line, somewhere in the family might have committed some kind of sin, that now this child is being punished with this physical manifestation of sickness. And so they was dealing with all of that as well. And it was lonely at times, and I can imagine that for my parents and for my family, it was not an easy thing to deal with. It must have been lonely for them to, and probably tiring for them to keep having to explain what had happened to me, and that it's not contagious, and other people can't get it from me by touching me, but at the same time you can't touch me, because touching me means that you're going to hurt me. So it was,
Wow.
must have been very tiresome. And the more I became aware of it, the older I got, I was able to articulate for myself and explain to people for myself that this is what I'm going through. Um, but from a social point of view, I think I always just took a chance of just being very vocal and just assuring people that it's okay to ask questions. So if I notice somebody staring, or somebody would come up to me and ask a question, like, I never shy away from it. I just very boldly say, this is what happened. I was born with this skin condition. And then they'd ask more questions, and you explain as best you can. And I think that really opens a door for conversation, because I'm all about teaching and educating. And I always say, the more people that are aware of it, the easier it makes it for me to be out in the big world, because then I'm not having to explain myself constantly all the time. But it was never easy. There were times of being lonely. There was rejection that I was faced with. In my early 20s, it was difficult trying to figure out, the kind of work I could get into. School exams. I missed so much of school just from being sick all the time, that it was constantly having to play catch up with school. And my sister played a big role there, because she'd bring notes home for me, and I'd be able to study from notes that she had taken. But even matric exams, I mean, I wrote my matric exams in my school sick room for a couple of papers because I ended up having a throat episode and I couldn't swallow. And so, it was having to explain to the school that this is what was going on, and explain to people even at my work when I started working, and looking at careers and things at a later stage, having to explain all of these things. And it was difficult. It was not easy, and not everybody understands the extent of how much you go through and how much EB affects not just physically, but mentally, internally, emotionally. I had to become, I always say it's a bit of a paradox because I have such thin skin, but I had to be very thick skinned from a young age because it was a lot to deal with, on all sides.
So, Shirvani, what is your day job other than being Mrs. Globe finalist now?
So my day job right now is just being a full-time mommy. I'm a content creator on social media, a micro influencer as well. So I really started focusing on the social media side of things only in the last, I would say, 3 to 4 years, because my corporate career came to quite an abrupt end, which was also something that I never really quite expected. And it was difficult to deal with having to go through that, and having to start from scratch and go back, because that's happened twice. So in my early 20s, I was employed by a nice company, but I had no idea how to even approach the working situation. And
Mm.
you have on your CV, and I'm sitting down and I'm writing my CV, and there's one line that says health. Front page of your CV, and it says health. And I remember sitting there and staring at my computer screen for such a long time because I didn't know what to write in there. I couldn't say health good. I couldn't say health bad because like how do you explain? And this is the first page of your CV, and if you're on page number one, you say that there's a health condition, they're not even going to look at any more of your CV because corporates want somebody that's healthy and that's able to work and to perform and to fulfill the job that they're paying you to do. And so I almost had to do an addendum to my CV and say, okay, health, please refer to pages so and so and so that I could go in and explain in a bit more detail about what was going on. And it was difficult because initially I didn't put on my CV that I was disabled. I never classified myself, I think, in my younger years as being disabled, even though I didn't realize that had I done this at an earlier stage, it would have benefited me in the long run. But I just never wanted to even associate myself with the word disabled because people think of it as being such a dirty word, if you want to say that. There's just so many wrong connotations associated with the word, and this is also why I'm so vocal about it these days, because it's not a bad word. It really is not a bad word. And so having gone into my first job, I was employed basically as a normal person, frontline position. I was working as a receptionist, for absolute first job. And I had no idea how it would affect things, because being having to be away, like if I had an eye episode, I get blisters on the surface of my eyes, for example, and I just wake up one day and I can't open my eyes, and that was the biggest thing that affected my jobs, and even my life today. It's just the most disruptive thing because there's no planning for it. It happens when I'm asleep, so I'll go to sleep normal, wake up in the middle of the night screaming in pain because I've got a blister in my eye and I can't open my eye the next day, and it is by far the most painful thing that I deal with. But that was one of the things that I had to deal with my job, and having to wake up in the morning and not be able to go in, being in a front line position where you are the first person that somebody sees when they walk into the business, was difficult. And I managed it for 3 years, but it was a lot of pressure. It was a lot of pressure on the company to having to accommodate for when I'm not there, because then it means somebody else has to take out of their position to come and sit in for me. And so it got to the point of where I think they were just also hurtful and couldn't really accommodate anymore. And I was sick for 2 days, and I got into work one day, and then somebody else was sitting in my chair, and they had called me in and said, unfortunately, we can't have you in this position anymore. It's just too much for the company. There's no planning involved, and as much as we feel sorry for you, we cannot continue like this. And so I
Yeah.
was dismissed from my job, and it was heartbreaking. I mean, at that stage, I was like 23 years old. People are by then, they've completed studying, and you're getting into the rhythm of finding the career that you want to get into. And here I was sitting and having no idea of what to do with my life, what to do with my career, how do I go into another job, how do I explain things. And so I really had to sit down and think about it, and I said, maybe I need to go and look at jobs for disabled people. And that's what I did. I did a quick Google search and I looked for jobs for disabled people and I found a learnership. And it was paying peanuts at that stage, from having gone from earning a salary to now considering to getting into a learnership. But I said to myself, I said, at least I come up with some kind of qualification. And I go in being recognized as a disabled individual. So maybe the accommodation would be a little bit better. And it was a good decision because I managed, I managed to stay in that job for 10 years. I did extremely well in that, in the job that I was in. I grew from strength to strength to strength, and my career was really flourishing. And then we got to the age of 30, and my health started just taking a turn for the worst. And it was just something that I never expected. I was married for a few months by then, so newly married, navigating all the highs and lows of being a newly married couple and having to live with somebody who's still getting used to everything that I have to deal with as well, and figuring out work and all of those things. And my health really deteriorated at a point of where we just couldn't control the blistering and the itching. And I was placed on steroid treatment, and I was going into hospital basically every few months to get intravenous immunotherapy done, to where they suppressed the immune system because my body was fighting against itself basically, and we couldn't control it. And it was horrible. And at that stage, even obviously it affected my job as well. And again, I had to be let go. And it was harder than being let go in my early 20s, because now I'm in my 30s,
Yeah.
and I have to start from scratch all over again. But even looking back, I think when every door has closed, I've committed it to God, and I've said, you know what, the plans that you have for me, and so I'm leaving this in your hand. And at every stage, God has come through, and something or the other has come up where another door has opened in terms of saying, this one's closed, but this is what you can do. And I was so encouraged at that stage to start doing social media and to start sharing my story, to start sharing my struggles of being disabled and being employed in the corporate sector, but also being a mom that's disabled and being a wife that's disabled, and being a woman that's navigating this really disabling condition and having to go through life. And I started sharing my story on social media, and from there it really just blew up. The last few years, it's the amount of exposure that it's brought to the condition itself, to my life, to my challenges. And that's basically how I ended up where I am today with Mrs. Globe, where I've just taken the step of boldness and I've said I really want to take my platform to another level. And I'm going to take a chance and enter this competition where the beauty space is so dominated by unrealistic beauty standards, that young girls are just looking at what they see in magazines and what they see on television, and
Come
it's
on.
unattainable. It's unrealistic and it's unattainable. And I said I want to be the person that's going to step into the space and show other women that we can change it. it
Mm.
it's it's a long road, but it is possible to start changing the narratives, especially in these situations, because I know, being that young girl that was looking at the magazines and not seeing anybody that looked like me, and not being
Wow.
able to find anybody to relate to, and not having
Yeah.
role models that I could realistically relate to, was very difficult. And so I don't want other women growing up in this environment to be the same. And I said, I'm going to be that change. And so I'm going to step into that space and start changing the narrative in my little
Wow.
way. This is why I entered Mrs. Glow.
You see, what I'm just thinking of now, Shirvani, and I mentioned this the other day as well, is obviously in the Bible, when we know that God is generational God, so he's the father of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but then Jacob was the beneficiary of everything that has been done prior. So the wells were already dug. He was hy kon gehardloop het met die ding. But Abraham had to go dig the wells. He had to be the pioneer. And like you said now, there was no one that you could look up to. It takes you much deeper to be the one that has to be the front runner, the pioneer, that has to dig the wells, that has to pave the roads, that have to be the first face to say, I am willing to do this, even if it's not for me, but for my next generation, or to show other women that there's a different face of beauty, because I didn't choose this. So it was the hand that was dealt me. But how am I going to navigate through life and still embrace? Because just because of that, it doesn't mean that your life is not worthy or beauty is not. Dit is my fantastische voorbeeld, and I just want to honor you. And there's some questions that's been coming through, but I mean, there's so much depth to what one can actually ask. Because if I think about just being a married woman, like you say now, there are elements of being married and intimacy and all of those things that must make it very hard for you. But then you've also birthed your children. So I don't know if it's via C-section or whatever, but still it was, I can just imagine, could you breastfeed, all of those things? How do you cradle your baby while still overcoming excruciating pain? Can we delve into that for a second?
Yes, yes, we absolutely can. There's so much that we can unpack there, just on on that element. But yeah, intimacy. Again, going back to like when I was younger and my teenage years, and you start talking about these things with your friends and that kind of thing. And there wasn't much that I could say, because in the back of my mind, I just kept thinking, am I even going to be able to do the act? Because if my skin is as sensitive as it is, how is this even going to be possible? There was
Come on.
no, at that stage I was connected with nobody from the EB community. Now we have forums on Facebook and Instagram, and I know of other people in South Africa that have the condition, and I'm very well connected with people overseas. And we have forums for women with EB, where we talk about these things and we educate younger girls and that kind of thing, and we are their role models. But I didn't have any of that. There was nobody that I could go to say, what was your experience, what did you do, how did you navigate this? It was literally completely trial and error, completely trial and error, in terms of how I'd navigate things. Just I know my mom and my dad are probably watching. It's probably cringe for them to even watch this part of these things, but even just when I had boyfriends and that kind of thing growing up, just having to explain to them about kissing, because I couldn't stick out my tongue, and my mouth is that small. So how do I even explain to them about, you know like kissing would be different, and it would be something that they'd need to adapt to, and that kind of thing. And it was crazy having to navigate all of this and just deal with everything else. And I don't know where I got the strength and the braveness and the boldness to actually just do all of these things. But I think, God gives you your portion, and He gives you grace and mercy to navigate all of these things. And there was always just this braveness in me. And it's okay, well, you've got to try. You've got to try things. And, pregnancy itself, when I felt pregnant with my daughter, my firstborn, I was not married. I was in a relationship that was, not the greatest of relationships. I had been in it. He was my first very serious boyfriend, the first man that I brought home to meet my parents, and that kind of thing. And so you attach a lot of sentimental value, when you're in this situation with this person. And I just didn't know how to walk away from that. I don't think I
Wow.
had boldness at that stage, because I was so invested in the relationship. I was so invested in terms of saying, I've gone through so many years with this person. Maybe it will get better. And I think every time I prayed and I asked God to show me, is this the man for me? He constantly showed me that this was not the man for me. But I stayed in it. I stayed in it because I just felt like I was obligated. And, I felt like this person has now gone through so much with me. Even from a sexual point of view, like I said, I didn't know if there were things that I could have or couldn't do. And so, we started to explore these things together. And I needed to know for myself, if I was going to marry this person, was I going to be able to fulfill, that part of being a wife? And so, these are things that I navigated. And growing up in a Christian home, I mean, it was very convicting. It was something I never discussed with my parents. And I never would have went to them and said, I was considering having sex with this person, because I needed to know if I could. Firstly, I needed to know if I'd be able to do it, going into a marriage situation. And so, yes, I had sex before marriage, and unfortunately I fell pregnant. And having finding out that I was pregnant with my daughter, I had no idea that I was even pregnant up until I was 18 weeks pregnant, because growing
Wow.
up, I was constantly told that I would not be able to have kids. So it's not even something that we were thinking about at that stage. It happened. It was at a time in the relationship where I actually had the courage to walk away. We had broken up, you know and I'd gone through weeks of not even talking to this person, weeks and months of not talking to this person. My sister had gotten married during that time, and he was at the wedding. And at my sister's wedding, actually, prophecy was spoken over my life. I had a pastor come up to me who I'd grown up with, and she was my Sunday school teacher from when I was a little girl, and we hadn't seen her for years and years, because we'd moved away from Durban and we were now living in Johannesburg. But my sister got married in Durban, and she and her husband officiated my sister's wedding. And so during the ceremony, she'd come up to me at some point and she said, I just want to share something with you. And I said, okay, go ahead. And she said, I don't know what's going on with your life, at the moment, and what's going on with your relationship, but I see things. And we hadn't, my partner at that time hadn't told anyone that we had broken up. We kept it to ourselves, and we kind of said, after my sister's wedding, we'd start sharing with the family that, really, I'm at the end of my rope now. This relationship is not working. I've had enough. I'm done. I'm walking away from this.
Mm.
And so we kept it quiet. And at the wedding, the pastor came up to me and she said, I don't know, what's going on with everything, but I just see that there's some changes that's coming. I don't know if you're going to be getting married, or I don't know, but I see something very big happening in your life in about 8 months' time from now. She said specifically 8 months' time. And I laughed at her. I laughed. I did. I didn't want to tell her in that moment that, oh my God, you seek marriage, but I've even broken up with this man. Like, that's not happening. I'm not marrying this person. But I laughed and I received it well. And I said, okay, we'll see. We'll see where it goes. And at that stage, I would have been, going back and doing the calculations, I would have been a month pregnant at my
Sure.
sister's wedding. And she was talking about changes happening in 8 months' time, this big change
Oh,
that has
wow. Oh, my goodness.
time. And she was actually referring to the birth of my daughter. And I don't know if it's something that she saw, and maybe in that moment she was scared to tell me because she knew I was unmarried, and she knew it would have been like, I think she probably realized, maybe she had seen it in the spirit, that I didn't even know that I was going to be birthing this child. I only found out 3 months later that I was pregnant with my daughter Gabriella.
Sure.
And just navigating and going through that relationship was horrendous. My skin took a complete turn for the worst. I think it was very brought on just by stress and not
Yes.
knowing what was going to happen. How was I going to carry this child to full term? Even just breaking the news to my parents and telling them I'm pregnant, and, being unmarried and sharing with the rest of the family within the Indian community. This is unheard of. You're bringing shame upon your family and all those kind of things. And so it was navigating all of that. And I remember, I think my dad was probably the one I was the most scared of telling. So I told my mom first, and I said, "You need to break the news to dad, because there's no way that I can sit in front of my dad and and break this kind of news." And so she did. And I didn't speak to my dad. The morning after, got up really early the next day, and I went to work. And I phoned my sister having a breakdown in the car, and I'm like, by now dad knows. He knows, but I haven't spoken to me, and he's not reached out to me, and I don't know what to expect. And I'm having a literal panic attack on the side of the road.
Sure.
Parked my car off on the side of the road. And my sister said, just calm down, just, get to work and we'll sort this out. And then I got to work and I typed this email to my dad. I said, I need, there's so much I need to get off my chest. But, as a woman and as a young girl, I need to explain to dad why. Sorry, I'm getting so emotional. But I needed to explain to him why I even had to have sex before marriage. And I had to explain to him, just going through all these things. And as a woman, I don't know what this journey is going to look like. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go through this whole pregnancy and birth a child that's healthy or not. We didn't know anything. And I said, I'm just committing it to God. And I poured my heart out to my dad on this email. And I left it with him, and I prayed about it, and I left it with him. And I got home that morning, that afternoon, and, dad came and we sat down. And he was emotional, and he said, these are things I've prayed for you since the day you were born. We didn't know whether you'd be able to have kids. We didn't know whether you'd be able to do these things. And so as much as you've been worrying about it for all these years, we've worried about it too. And so I can't even see the wrong in this. I can't even see, about the shame and being disappointed and all of that, because I don't see any of that. And, the thing for my dad was, he never said to me he was disappointed in me.
Wow.
If I ever heard those words from him, I would have been crushed. Like, I would have
Sure.
been crushed. And he never said that. He said, whatever it is, we will deal with it.
Wow.
We'll go through this. And the amount of support that came thereafter, it was like this weight was just lifted, and I could go on, and we could focus on the pregnancy and focus on the baby and focus on my health. And even just, breaking the news to the extended family, he took all of that on himself. And he says, if
Wow.
anything to say to my child, you come speak to me. You don't
Well
speak
done, Dad. I
to
hope
me.
Dad is watching this.
My back 100%. And even just being in that situation, being unmarried, I said, what do I do? And he says, I want you to think about this nicely, because I'm not forcing you to marry this man. You don't have to do that. Please don't feel like you're obligated to marry this person, because at that stage I had explained everything that was going on. They had been through so much in this relationship with me, so they knew for themselves the amount of pain and confusion and heartache that this relationship had actually brought into my life, that it was not for me. And he said to me, he said, I'm not going to force you into this marriage. In fact, if anything, please don't marry this person. And that was the encouragement I got from that. I said, we are here for you. You will continue to be in our home. We will take care of you. We'll take care of the baby. And, once that weight was lifted, we could start to focus on everything else. And I tell you, God really took control from there on, because my daughter was born healthy. It was going into the operating theater. I had C-sections for all three of my kids. But my C-section that first time was completely botched as well, because the doctors didn't know how to handle everything. I was injured so badly in theater. That's a whole different story, for another day. But, just to sum it up, it was completely botched. I was left with open wounds basically throughout my body. They had placed this sheet on me that they place, when you go in for a C-section, that sticks to the skin. And so when they took the sheet off, they took all of the skin with it. So I was raw, basically my entire torso right down to my thighs. And then having to deal with the pain and from the incision itself. And you've just birthed a new baby. And so my milk never even came in, after I had Gabriella, because my body was just under so much trauma. So I wasn't able to breastfeed her. There was no skin to skin. We couldn't even do skin to skin. She was taken away to ICU because she also had some complications after birth. Then she had to have a little surgery done. So part of her bowel was collapsed. And they picked us up prenatally. So we knew that when she'd be born, she would have to go in to have that little part of her bowel resected. And so she needed to have surgery. I was so ill on one side. So there was, there was such a disconnect, I think, when she was born. I was so angry because everybody else had seen her and held her, and I couldn't do that. Because here I was lying in this bed, just completely raw from head to toe, with nobody knowing what to do with me. And I was so frustrated. We got to the point where I said, just bring my mom in here, bring my medical kit in here, and we'll sort this out ourselves. And I got my mom in there, and we started dressing, just from one side, from head to toe. We just started dressing all of the wounds. And then I was, put under pain control and that kind of thing, because I was just in so much pain afterwards. But I missed out on that whole experience of having to have skin to skin with my baby, and having to breastfeed her, and going through that whole experience. And because that birth was so traumatic, I never thought I'd do it again. In fact, I said to myself again, like, I have one child now, she's healthy. I think I should just be grateful for that, and not even try to go through this process again. Like my parents would also say, it was too traumatic for everyone involved to have to go through that again. But then, I got married eventually. I met the man of my dreams. God
Ooh,
brought him into my life. I prayed for him, and I said, I don't see myself being lonely, and I don't see myself being single. And even when Gabriella was born, she took my family name. And I said, one day when I'm married, she's going to take my husband's name. That's what I would hope for her. And so, a couple years later, I met my husband, and he was just the most amazing human being ever. In a lot of ways, he says, we say we saved each other, because he was going through his own stuff, and I was going through my own stuff. And we really came, I think, to a point in our lives where we needed each other. And when I met him, it was just like complete, like I just knew there's a piece of the puzzle that had fitted. And we married within a year. We got married. And once we had got married, obviously he's an only child. Just to give you some background, he's an only child to his mom. And so he I started thinking about, maybe I need to give him some children. And I never said this to anybody. This was like in my mind, and it was conversations that I'd had between me and God. And I tell you, God had placed such a desire for me to have another child. It came out of
wow.
nowhere. After I got married, I had such a strong desire to have another child. And God showed me that I'd have a son. And so this was between me and God. I didn't tell anybody about it. I didn't even tell my husband about it, because he knew what, I told him what I'd gone through with my first pregnancy. And he said, no pressure. We don't have to do this again. I'd be completely okay if we never had any of our own children. But in my heart, there was that desire. And that desire was put there by God. And God had showed me that I would have a son. And so from the very first year of marriage, when I'm going through my career, it ended at that time. I'm going through all of these things, from a health point of view. And I'm having treatment done that's, I know, not going to be good for my body in the long run. At that stage, they were even talking about possibly starting chemotherapy, because that's how bad.
Wow.
And I prayed about it and I said, no, I'm not going that far. And it got to the point of where I said, I'm stopping all treatment. Like, I'm just not doing this anymore. I can't handle going into hospital. I can't handle all of this medication that's going into my body. I started trying things naturally. I committed it to God. And I said, you know what? You've put this desire in my heart to have a child. You place it there. So if you've given me this dream and this design, you've showed me that I'm going to have a son, you have to make it possible. Like, you've got to work with me at some point now. Because when I was on treatment, just to give you a bit of background there, during the time that I was on treatment, like having immune suppression therapy or anything that's even remotely close to chemotherapy, you're not menstruating. So I wasn't menstruating at that time. I wasn't ovulating. I wasn't menstruating. I didn't have a period for more than 8 months. And so I thought, how am I even supposed to fall pregnant when all of this is going on with my body? And I said, God, you've like, something's got to give now. Something's got to give. And for the next like 2 years, this went on, and there was just this desire, and I was fighting with God, and I said, where's my son that you promised me? Where is this child that you promised me? I want my son, and this desire was so deep, but I couldn't mouth it to anyone. I just kept it to myself. And when I finally did fall pregnant with my son, I remember it was like instantly I just knew something had changed in my body. I was only about 2 weeks pregnant. Like, whereas my daughter was so far pregnant and didn't even know. With my son, I was 2 weeks pregnant and I just knew. I said, oh my God, like, I woke up one morning and I said, something's changed. I think I'm pregnant. And so I went out, I bought a pregnancy test, peed on the stick, and it was positive. And I sat in the bathroom, and I tell you, the word of God speaks of the peace of God that surpasses all understanding that comes over you. And I remember just sitting in my bathroom for 5 minutes afterwards, and this immense peace just completely flooded my atmosphere and completely flooded my spirit. And so even when I took the stick and I showed my husband, he was panicking. He's like, oh my God, like, are you even serious? And I said, yes. And I said, I don't want you to worry about this because God is already taking care of it. Like, I have so much of peace about this. I know this pregnancy is going to be different. I know I'm going to have a completely different experience.
Wow.
That's what I confessed from day one of having found out I was pregnant with my son. And, to the word of God, he gave me a completely different experience. My pregnancy was healthy. My skin was beautiful. It was amazing. I had the best pregnancy I could have possibly hoped for. My son was born healthy. And he also was prophesied to me. Not, God had given me the vision of having a son. But a few weeks before, a few weeks before I found out I was pregnant, a friend spoke prophecy into my house. She was sitting in my house and we were having a conversation. And I was saying to her, I'm struggling with back pain and this, all of these things going on. And I think my period is supposed to come and it hasn't come yet. And she says, no, you're pregnant. And I said, no, I'm not. Because in my mind, I'm still thinking there's all of these things going on in my body. Like, I can't be pregnant. And she said, no, I think you're pregnant. And, she said that and we just kind of left it. We didn't even think twice about it. We laughed about it again. And so when I found out I was pregnant, I went back to her and I said, oh my God, you were right, like, I'm pregnant. She said, no, I know. I saw this. Like, I could see that you were pregnant. And at that point, she told me, she said, this is not going to be the last one. And I said, no, this is like after this, I'm done. 2 and I'm done. I'm not even like, I didn't even think about having it that. And she says, no, I see one more for you. But it was like, she said it and then we left it. We'd never talked about it again. And I completely pushed it out of my mind. Because for me, I'm saying, no ways am I having a number 3. Like, I've got my 2 babies and like, that's it. And so when the third one crept in, I had to go back to her again and I was crying. And I said, why did you say that? Because now I'm pregnant number 3. And this is not the one that I wanted. And it came again at the worst time in my life because we had just lost my grandmother. And I was extremely close to her. And it was exactly a month to her death date that I found out I was pregnant with my third son.
Sure.
I was in such just so much turmoil about everything that was going on. I said, I don't want this. This is not what I want for myself. And she, my sister came back and she came back and they all gave me the same word. And they said, God doesn't give you what you want. He gives you what you need.
Sure. Powerful.
And that was the word that I held on to. I said, I don't know, God, what is your plans for this third child? But whatever it is, I commit it into your hands. And again, the pregnancy was seamless. And, we went through everything. And he was born healthy as well. And with my 2 sons, with the second and third pregnancy, I was able to breastfeed. My milk had come in normally. It wasn't for a long period of time, but I was able to even do skin to skin with them. So everything that I didn't experience in my first pregnancy, God restored in the other 2 pregnancies. Like, completely.
Powerful.
100%. It was a much better experience. And breastfeeding was difficult. The skin is very soft and sensitive in that area, so the babies couldn't suckle for very long. it did, my breast did blister eventually. And so just having that experience for even the few days that I was able to do it was just so fulfilling for me. And I said from the beginning, I said, if even if I'm not able to do it for a long period of time, I just want to experience what it's like.
Come
And just
on.
having had that experience, my heart was full. I was happy. And so, yeah,
Wow.
whatever the devil tries to take away in one instance, God restores, and that's truly what He did. Even just going through my marriage and my pregnancies and my kids today, it's brought
Hmm.
me so much of joy.
That's so powerful. So I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I've got two or so more questions. So I want to ask you,
Yes,
your hands. It looks like, is there any issue with your hands?
yes. So, where's my camera? There we go. So, what happens with EB skin is EB skin, when an area of skin wounds, the skin isn't able to stretch. So EB skin contracts. So what's happened with my hands is over time, because of the amount of constant trauma, blistering, wounding, healing, it's like an ongoing cycle. So over time, the skin in the hands is pulled together and contracted. So the hands have actually, find my camera again. The hands have actually pulled together. So the fingers have fused together on both my hands. So I have very little grasp in terms of my fingers, and they are stuck together, as you can see. But that's what happens with EB skin. So I don't have any nails. The nails fell off when I was probably a baby still. I don't remember I have ever having nails on my hands or my feet. My feet as well are also fused like this. My toes are completely fused over, actually. There's no spaces between my toes whatsoever, whereas at least with my hands, I still have my thumbs. But yeah, that's just how EB skin works, is that it's, injured skin contracts, it isn't able to stretch. And so I need to go in and have repeated surgery to release the fingers every couple of years to keep function in the hand. So this is something I'm going to have to do again soon, because the hands are quite bad at the moment.
Okay, so if they open them up, whatever, and it heals, it doesn't just fuse together immediately
It
again.
It does. So unfortunately, it's an ongoing. Like, I've had three hand surgeries on the right hand and two on the left hand so far in the last few years. But it's something that we have to keep repeatedly do to keep function in the hands. We know it's going to fuse over again. That's just the nature of what the condition is. But it is important to continue having the surgery, because all that will happen is then the hand will just completely end up being like that. And I'll have no function in the hand whatsoever. So it's extremely painful. It's a horrible thing to have to go through every few years, but it's something I have to keep doing, because I need function in my hands. I write, I drive. As a mom, you're preparing meals and you're cooking for your kids, and it's playing with them and drawing with them and coloring with them and all of these things. And I want to be able to be around to do that for as long as I possibly can. So anything that I can do to aid in that process, obviously I'm going to just keep doing. So surgery is something that I have to look at doing again.
Wow, wow, Shirvani. And then obviously, in your journey initially when you felt pregnant, it was that boyfriend, and it was the fear of the rejection or the shame that you bring on the family, all of the trauma. And I believe that, or I guess at that time you were already a born again child of God, but maybe not as mature, because I can see, even as you'd speak about your progression in your life, how the maturity came, how the identity in Christ came, how the understanding of that God, He works all things together for your good. So was there, when were you physically born again? When did your relationship with Jesus really take a turn where you knew that there's a really special relationship between you and Him?
I think it was really at the point of my daughter being born. That's when I really, during my pregnancy and shortly after her being born. I mean, when you have nothing, when you have nothing else to cling to, that's when I really started to cling to God. And I really committed my life to God. And I said, if this child is born healthy, I'll commit her to you. She will be yours. You, like, whatever it is, you work in my life, you work in her life. And her name, Gabriella, actually means God is my might. And even with naming her, like, yesterday we had to do a little exercise. We had to explain to her the meaning behind her name and why she was named that. So it was nice to just explain to her. But I really clung to Second Corinthians 12:10, that said, when I am weak, He is strong. And so when I picked out her name, I wanted a name that meant strength, to remind me of the strength and of God, that He really carried me through that whole pregnancy. And that was it was a turning point for me, because I think I felt at that point that the scales came off my eyes, that God
Wow.
been working behind the scenes for a long time, and he'd been showing me that this relationship wasn't for me, and he'd been showing me, I have bigger plans for you. But I was being disobedient. I was being disobedient. And at the point of where I felt pregnant, I think that's really where I had to realize I need to stop now living for myself. There's somebody else that I have to live for. And I
Mm.
really clapped God and I said, whatever it is now that's going to happen going forward, I completely leave it in your hands. My child, my future husband, my family relationships, my job, my everything. I just committed absolutely everything into God's hands. And you'll be surprised, after my daughter was born, I started really, I was promoted in my job twice after that. Things
Come
that
on.
had happened before, God really took these things and He turned the entire situation around. And that for me was a turning point. And since then, I've never looked back. Everything that I've committed into God's hands, He's brought into fruition. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of people might look at me today and look at the situation and say, but you haven't received your healing. I think especially within the Christian community, you have people that may be Christian in the background. You're so prayerful and you speak with faith and you have a good relationship with God. Why haven't you received your healing? And I always say to them, I said, maybe it's not about the healing. There's so much else that God's done in the background. My testimony is already so big. It's already
Come
so big.
on.
And I think that when the healing comes, whether it comes this side of the earth or whether it comes, in the next life in heaven, I'm going to see that one day. If it never
Woo!
happens, it's okay. I'm okay with it because God he's already so big in my life. He's already shown up so big in my life. And the testimony is already so strong that I don't know what his plans are for me going forward. But I know that whatever they are, he's in control. He's got this, he's in control of it. And it's not something I ever have to worry about. The peace of God truly sits with me every day of my life. Like I think when I get up in the morning, I get up with that peace. I don't have to worry about anything. I think when even going into the competition, even going into next week, of course there's nerves, and of course you're worried about how are things going to happen in stage. Heels, how I'm going to manage to walk in my heels and that kind of thing. Because I'm
Yes,
still
yes.
on my feet, so I've had to adapt my shoes. Like I'm not going to be wearing the same heels that the other girls are wearing. I'm actually wearing boots that's got like a tiny little heel on it. So I've had to adapt in those ways, but I've literally committed this entire journey to God. And I said, even when I speak in my interviews next week, because we're going to come in front of the judges and have one-on-one interviews and share our stories and that kind of thing. I said, whatever the words I speak, Lord, you speak through me. Let
Come
everything,
on.
this platform, you've given me this platform, so you take it and you use it for your glory.
Man, this is one of the best testimonies that I've had on here. And this must be, I mean, if you guys knew how we struggled in the beginning, nothing wanted to work, everything went wrong.
Yeah.
And but this was such a powerful testimony for the Lord Jesus Christ. And I pray that his glory touch every person watching, everyone listening, even the podcast years from now. Whether it's someone they have the same condition or maybe any other debilitating thing in your life, or just whatever you're going through, to know that God shows himself strong, that he is there, his hand is never too short to reach out. And like you say now, that there are some things that we never have the answers to. And in Afrikaans, we can say, ons kan ons koppe breek om te probeer uitfigure wat gaan aan. But there are certain things that if you can make peace with it and you can still see how God is moving and working, man, you are a living, glorious testimony. So Shirvani, how can people, is there something like that with Mrs. South Africa? There is, for example, the People's Choice Award. Is there something like that in Mrs. Globe where people can still vote or do anything to push you forward or to support you in your final leg of this journey?
No, so there isn't a voting segment at all with the Mrs. Globe. It is the first year that they're running Mrs. Globe
Yes,
South Africa. So, it's still in their baby stages, and it's
yes.
been a lot of planning and navigating. You spoke to Renska yesterday, so you would have got a bit of, a bit more information on that. But no, there isn't a voting segment involved. I think the best thing that I can ask for is, if people go onto my Facebook, go onto my Instagram, follow my journey there. And you'll be able to see what we're doing, what the outcome will be. I'll be sharing pictures from next week when all of the judging and all of those things are taking place. It's going to be quite an exciting journey. But yeah, we are still fundraising for the Beloved Foundation. This is the foundation that Mrs. Globe is supporting this year. They are doing amazing work, also in terms of, their theme ties in with my theme of restoration and that kind of thing so nicely, because they're doing amazing work where they support victims of human trafficking and rehabilitating and restoring those women, and trying to get them back into society again, because the trauma that comes from having come out of those situations is like, I can't even explain, the amount of trauma that they go through. And so they are very involved with supporting women and kids in the situation. And so if anybody does want to support the Beloved Foundation, they're welcome to get in touch with me. We are still the last day for fundraising is actually Sunday this week, so we're tallying up on Monday. But if there is anyone that wants to make a contribution to the Beloved Foundation to support my Mrs. Globe journey, they can definitely, pop me a DM on Instagram or on Facebook, or get in touch via WhatsApp or whatever it is, to make a contribution to them. I think that's all I can really ask for in terms of support, support the foundation rather.
I mean, so you are, I don't know if that handle is right. On Instagram, it's that _sensitive_skin mom. Is it right?
It's actually That Fragile Skin Mom. So I'll put it up. It's that fragile with dots in between. So that's my Instagram.
Okay, so we'll fix that quickly. Then I just want to go back to that. I'm going to edit that quickly. That Fragile Skin Mom. Then there is a comment that I just want to get to very quickly, of someone. The people were very, very inspired. Fragile dots. There we go. So it's just dots in between.
Yes.
Here, let's just see if that is correct. Let me put it on there. Is that right?
That's correct.
Whatever. You can just search for Shirvani Naran. You'll find her immediately. With the comments, firstly, Moira asked something earlier, and she just asked very briefly. She said, Shirvani, you're an incredible overcoming queen. Is there a risk of a child being born with EB if a mom has it? Just in a nutshell.
Yes, so it is a genetic condition. So there is a risk with passing it on, just like with any other genetic condition, but it varies between the different types of EB. So with EB, you have EB simplex, you have EB junctional, and you have EB dystrophic. And obviously, within the different subtypes, the chances are differ quite a bit. It's quite a complicated thing to get into, but basically, just to explain from my situation, so I have dystrophic EB. Which is not a dominant form of EB, but it's definitely a more severe form of EB. So the person that has it themselves will have it very aggressively. What happens is with my kids is they will likely carry a gene, but they'll not present with EB. And it would take two genes, two of the same genes, to come together for them to have a child with EB. So the chances even of them having children with EB is very, very small. So although I have the gene, I'm a carrier of the gene. My husband obviously doesn't have the gene. He's not a carrier of the gene. So we don't have kids with EB. My previous partner, same. So with the recessive dystrophic EB, it takes two. You'd have to have two matching genes, and the possibility of that happening is very, very different. Whereas with dominant EB, there's a 50% chance. With recessive dystrophic EB, the chance is 25%. So although the risk was there, it's something I never even considered, and I think that was just purely based on faith. It was something that I just did. They will not have this, and their generations to come. I've broken that curse, and I've said,
come on.
Never manifest in any generation to come. It's not in my history at all, and it will not be in my future at all. So it starts and stops with me.
Amen. That is so profound for those listening right now and those watching, that when you're part of this born again Christian has power by our faith. And it's not just the things that we say, but what you truly believe. And then we have to make a stand. We have to draw a line in the sand and to say, up to here and no further. What we don't fight for our next generations, they will have to fight for, whether it's even in the natural, whatever we don't stand for today, for Christian marriages, for children walking in their identity, for gender, to still be a man and a woman. If you're not going to stand for that thing and we're just going to sit back and relax, our children are fighting those battles. But Shirvani, you're an overcomer. We're going to support your journey. But in Mrs. Globe, while we will support you, we'll pray for you. The hand of God and the provision of God can do what no amount of money, no amount of fame or anything like that can do. So you just go with that quiet confidence of, man, I've got this, whatever Jesus' journey is for you. And even next level for you and for your children, that you made a stand. Mommy is a woman of virtue. Mommy is a woman that is not afraid. Come on. I don't know anything better that you can do for your children, because they won't have to bow to feeling rejected or shamed or anything like that. And if your parents are here, I really honor your mom and dad for the journey, your sister, everyone who sacrificed, and I know that they will get their rewards as well. Shirvani, let me just pray for you real quick. if that's fine with you.
Yes, yes.
Hallelujah. Lord Jesus, it is such a fantastic honor for us as sisters in Christ today to just speak about your glory. And Lord, to see how you have been the golden thread throughout her life. That you've been there through the deepest valleys and there where she celebrated great victories. That you are constantly her banner. And that you are Jehovah Rapha. You keep on healing her. There where the word came in the beginning that she would not surpass 6 months. Here she's almost 37 years old. Father, I give you the glory for her life. Lord, I pray that your angels and your favor will go before, even in a Mrs. Globe journey and everything else that you have for Shirvani, Lord. May her testimony make your name great wherever she goes. Lord, I pray for finances to flood into her life for all the medical procedures and everything that she has to go through. I pray that her cupboards will never run dry. And I pray that a boldness will come upon her, that she will never back down from testifying about the goodness of God. Lord, I pray for provision over her, protection, longevity over her life. And that she will be just trump every single thing, every record, every fact that the medical science might have had, that your truth comes and you give her a long life, that she will run with the wild horses, that she will fly with the eagles. And I pray for that peace that she felt with her second and with her children, that peace will right now come over her in Jesus' name. Amen. 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 Shirvani, I honor you today. This will be available as a podcast very shortly. She will share this everywhere. I want you guys to go and share. If this message has blessed you today, go and tell your people, tell your friends to go and watch the rebroadcast, and let's support her and her EB journey. Okay. Mwah. Bless all of you. Goodbye.
Chantell, thank you so much.
Okay. Bye, everyone.